When the wives are away, the boys will play. We'll tell you what guys love to do when the wives are gone for the weekend. Also, what do an iconic ESPN anchor and 20 whiskey sours have in common?
Oh, I know.
And it's Super Bowl 51. All that and more on this week's Dude for Adults. Let's go! Hey everybody, thanks for joining us this week. And fellas, before we start, I just gotta say I was blown away by the reaction and response we got for our debut episode. I thought it was so awesome that people out there are loving and enjoying what we're doing here.
Yeah, I got a ton of hate mail actually, so I would just say people just hated me but loved you guys, so this might be my last episode.
Which is normal, right? Isn't that kind of what we hear from most people?
That's my MO, yeah, to be hated, so.
I was especially impressed with the response we got, considering I didn't tell anybody that we did the podcast.
Come on!
I was nervous. I didn't know what the response was going to be. I didn't know how we were going to do. But no, I mean, the downloads are good. And that's maybe I'll tell a couple people this week.
Yeah, I hope
Like
so. I hope so.
Like your parents, and that's about it, right, Jason?
Yep, pretty much.
I
Because
was
I only know my parents and you guys.
Yeah, exactly. No, I was just kind of surprised. I mean, there were people, my wife told a lot of people about it, and there were people giving her feedback that I've never even really met before or talked to, and asking us when we were doing our second episode and when the second episode was coming out. So I thought that was pretty good, especially with people that don't even really know us, that they were intrigued by it. So instead of just listening to three assholes, talk about things, that they actually really enjoyed
Actually,
it.
that might be a better name than Dude, We're Adults. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
So before we really get into things this week, guys, we actually got some emails from some people asking questions, which I was shocked. I was like really shocked about, and which I think is pretty cool. So before we get into the news of the week, we got two emails. One I think is for both of you guys.
That's double the amount of emails we got last week.
Yeah, exactly. I know it's up 200%. I think it's for both of you guys. Either one of you can answer if you guys know this. And then there's another question, Mike, specifically for you that we'll get to later on in sports. The first question that we got is from a Christopher Warner. He asks, I believe in relation to Disneyland, changing the Tower of Terror ride to Guardians of the Galaxy. Do you guys know who is in charge or who makes the decisions to change or add rides at Disneyland?
Well, ultimately, it's Bob Iger and Tom Staggs who have the final say, unless Tom Staggs is not around anymore. Jason, you're much closer to that than I am.
The group that makes those decisions is called Walt Disney Imagineering, and presumably they've got someone with their finger on the pulse of pop culture who has decided to make the recommendation to the board that Guardians of the Galaxy is the future of Disney theme parks. And I guess for that reason, I'm glad that I'm not there anymore. And I wish that person the best because they have a long and bright future ahead of them.
I think it's changed over time because back in the day, it was a lot more Imagineering. Obviously, whoever's heading parks and resorts has, obviously the final say as well as the head of the organization. But nowadays, it seems like it's through partnerships as well.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong.
No,
Jason, with that being said, do you think it's going to get worse? Meaning like the addition of certain rides and movies taking, new movies taking over?
Well, I think Mike makes a good point, is that every year, or maybe every 2 years, whatever, they announce across the entire company, I mean, from ESPN to ABC to Parks to Cruise Line, everything in between, they say these are the 5 or 6 major synergy priorities. And, these are the 5 or 6 major brands or launches that are going to be a company-wide initiative that everybody's got to throw weight behind. And so I have no idea if Guardians of the Galaxy is one of those tentpole synergy messages, but it could be, and that could be part of the reason that they're making that the ride.
Yeah.
Can I just say I hate the word synergy? It's like how people hate the word moist. Synergy to me is just so, not that saying that I'm angry at you, Jason, for saying this.
Mike just leaves.
But it's like that word moist. I feel like I could put that word 5 times on my resume and people would be like, oh, this guy's a forward thinker. He's a real good candidate. Sorry.
Just put it in nowhere that it belongs. Just synergy is all over your resume.
Having worked at giant companies most of my adult life, all those buzzwords, they just annoy me.
Well, Christopher, thank you for writing in. We really appreciate that, and hopefully you got somewhat of an answer there.
Did we answer this question? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't even know. I don't even know. So just write us another one next week. We'll probably just do it again.
We'll bullshit through another answer.
Yeah, exactly. We'll make something up totally different this time. So, guys, let's go ahead and get into the news of the week. And so it was kind of hard coming up with news of the week because it seemed like everything. I mean, granted, we're not going to touch on politics here just because, like, oh my gosh, I don't even think any of us want to even get into that or even touch it. But then also, I went to the entertainment section on certain sites, and all of it had to do with entertainers and politics. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we just can't get away from this. But I was able to find something, and this came out, I believe, a couple days ago, or it might have been a week ago, and I thought it may be really interesting to you guys. So apparently, Aerosmith is hanging it up.
What?
The band has announced a run of European shows this spring and summer, dubbed their Farewell Tour, with dates coming to the U.S. in the fall. Frontman Steven Tyler suggested that it was time for the group to start thinking about getting off the road, although guitarist Joe Perry seemed to disagree with the statement and said the farewell will last a good while. So I just wanted, the listener doesn't know, maybe they did a little bit from last week, I think it was hinted at, but Jason is a huge Aerosmith fan. Mike is also a big fan as well, but that is Jason's favorite band. So I wanted to see what you guys, if you guys had heard something like this, if you had heard it was a farewell, and is it time, or should Aerosmith never hang it up?
No, I had not heard that, and gosh, that makes me really sad if that's in fact true. But the fact that Joe Perry and Steven Tyler are disagreeing over that announcement is no big surprise, as those two have never agreed on anything ever. But it also could be just a way for the band to be getting a little bit of press and a little bit of news if they're trying to get some headlines in anticipation of launching another U.S. tour. Which I was thinking about this morning. They haven't done a U.S. tour in a couple of years, so it felt like they were overdue. But gosh, I hope it's not farewell tour, because selfishly that would just be really sad.
Mike, what do you think?
So that's really sad to me because they were one of my first favorite bands. I don't love them as much as Jason does, but I do. They're definitely one of my tops. However, what are they? 70?
See, that's what
70,
I was gonna get to next. Is
so
when is it time for bands to hang? I mean, is it time? I mean, he's falling off stages, isn't he? Hasn't he like broke his leg or broke his arm because he falls off stages?
Well, only when he's on drugs, but yes, that's. Thank you for bringing that up.
Which he's not on drugs a lot of the time.
I'm not here to be his apologist. I'm just saying that like sometimes he makes bad choices.
I think their music probably sounds better when he's on drugs, but anyways.
I love their old songs. I don't think I've liked a song they've made past 1998.
You shut your mouth. You shut your mouth, because Just Push Play was the best album. And I don't care if you're like, oh, old school Aerosmith is better. Just Push Play was a fantastic album, so don't even start with.
But doesn't that happen with a lot of bands? Like, think about it. Dave Matthews, right? I think that guy comes out with an album every other year or 2 years, and I couldn't tell you the last album. I mean, I remember Crash. I think that came out in 98. Right? Same thing with the Goo Goo Dolls. Their last good album was probably in 2002, and yet they've come out with 3 records after that, and no one remembers it.
But speaking of Aerosmith, did you guys hear the news from Walt Disney World from, I think, a week or 2 ago about Aerosmith and what is happening with Rock and Roller Coaster?
Are they turning it to Guardians of the Galaxy?
No. But so during the pre-show of Rock and Roller Coaster, which is the indoor roller coaster where you take a high-speed limo, which is the roller coaster, to get to their concert in time, during the pre-show, like while you're in line, you walk into this quote-unquote recording studio where they have a video projection of the band up on the wall, and they're talking to you, from the studio. And Mike is making the motion that Steven Tyler makes, which is maybe a little bit of a lewd gesture about.
It's the shocker.
Okay.
I like how Jason wasn't going to go there. And then, Mike will just say it. Yeah, that's no problem for Mike.
He throws it up onto his forehead, and for the last 20, 25 years, it's gone either unnoticed or whatever. And suddenly now someone at Disney has decided that that's rude and offensive and needs to be removed. So they digitally changed Steven Tyler's hand so that he no longer bends his ring finger when he puts it up to his forehead.
Let me just say this. People have known about that for quite a long time. I lived in Orlando and people would talk about it. I just think people have become way more sensitive these days, and that's why it's all of a sudden changing. It's not like they all of a sudden had a come to Jesus moment with it. It's just everyone's getting sensitive.
All right, so moving on.
I'm just saying.
Real quick, Jason, do you remember the Aerosmith video game? Did you ever play that when you were younger? Mike, do you remember this? Were you
Is that the one where it was like at an arcade, right?
Correct.
And you would have a big gun and you would shoot I think like discs at the enemy, whatever it was. I remember that.
Yeah, that was a
like
great
at a
game.
pizza
I've
joint.
never seen that.
It was like every pizza place I went and had after like a Little League game, I would play that along with Ninja Turtles and The Simpsons.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, those I've beaten both of those arcade games, but I never saw the Aerosmith arcade game.
You guys mentioned Disney again really quick, and I don't want the listener to think that all we ever are going to talk about is Disney and then sports, but
Jason's smiling. So
you guys did mention Disney, and so there was another piece of news that came out this week from just Disneyland and Disney World in general, and I wanted to get your take on it, see what you guys thought. Disney wants to make theme park rides be controlled by your emotions. The company filed patents this past week for technology which could read riders' facial expressions and customize the ride according to their mood. It's titled Sensing and Managing Vehicle Behavior Based on Occupant Awareness. Say if you're bored, your vehicle may speed up or start spinning like crazy. If you're a little too excited, then your vehicle may ease up a little. They're saying that, no more throw up on the rides, because if they sense you're getting sick, they'll slow down the ride for you. And say if you're bored, they'll go ahead and speed it up. Plus, they say it's a way of making the rides never get old, and it allow for multiple rides on the attraction since it could change multiple times.
Does that mean if Brian looks up at the Little Mermaid on the Little Mermaid ride, she can start taking her top off?
Oh, he's very handsome, isn't he?
I'm just saying, like, if it can react to emotion, I mean, maybe.
people are worried
Is it
about
just the face
Steven
that they're
Tyler
looking
showing
at?
the shocker.
Is it just the face that they look at for your emotions, or are they trying to read your whole body?
They probably tense if you're like, they're probably sensitive. if you're like,
Keep going with it, Mike. You brought up
not-
the shocker earlier. Don't get shy now.
I mean, again, you think about what any ride at Disney, short of, I can't even think of one that, like Peter Pan's flight is the only one that has like 2 or 3 people. Everything else has 6 or more. Jason, jump in here. I'm sure you're trying to rack your brain.
So the one thing that I'm thinking
me
about
wrong,
is like
but-
the Winnie the Pooh ride. Isn't there like a Winnie the Pooh ride that has like 2 people in it, or one person in it that you go around, or even that?
I wonder if they
But
can
how are they going to? What are they going to jack the speed up of Winnie the Pooh? So if you're bored,
just makes a hard left to the exit if you think the ride sucks.
Yeah, just it pushes you out. I don't know. I heard that, so I thought, just with you guys having worked for them, I just was curious what you guys thought about that. I mean, obviously, I think they're going to have to develop new rides for this. I don't necessarily think it can be a lot of the old ones, but I was just curious what you guys might have thought. All right, so that's going to wrap up news of the week. Not a whole lot of news to get to, just because, like I said, it's just so political out there, and just everybody's going off on everything, and it's just like, wow, can we talk about maybe some other things right now? There is the life outside of this, outside of DC, but anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the sports section here. And I want to talk a little bit about, Mike, but we'll talk a little bit, obviously, about the Super Bowl is coming up. And for the listener out there, this is going to hit on Tuesday or Wednesday. So we're not going to talk a whole ton about the Super Bowl because obviously it's going to be over by then. But obviously with Mike being in Boston and being a huge Patriots fan, we are going to touch on a little bit. Mike sent me a text message earlier this week that said things had picked up in New England. So we'll talk about that here in a couple minutes. But this is actually a topic that interests me this week. And when I saw this, I sat up in my chair and just started smiling because the story that we could tell going along with that. Longtime ESPN announcer and anchor Chris Berman officially hangs it up this week and retires from ESPN after 38 years with the network. And the network actually ran a special entitled Chris Berman, He Did Go All the Way, which I thought was an interesting title. But Chris Berman goes all the way. And Chris is known for coming up with some very popular catchphrases like, he could go all the way, rumbling, bumbling, stumbling, Yeah, exactly. And coming up with clever nicknames for the players while he's reading the highlights. And so the show featured Chris Berman at his finest moments. However, Jason, we've seen Chris Berman at one of his worst moments, haven't we?
Well, certainly one of his sweatiest moments.
Yeah. So Jason, okay, so I'm going to set it up. I'm going to set it up here. I'm going to set it up here, and then Jason, I'm going to let you kind of tell the story. When I lived in LA, I worked for a company, an advertising company for Disney, and one of the perks of it was we got to go to a lot of events that was put on by the networks, and one of the events put on that year was the ESPYs, and so we got tickets to that, and so I invited Jason. I told Jason to come out to it, and so we ended up going to the ESPYs that night. And to be honest with you, Jason, like, I don't really remember anything about the ESPYs.
Do you remember who hosted that year?
No, like literally I have no really memory of even anything remotely relating to that show.
Well, the host of the ESPYs the year that we went was Lance Armstrong.
Oh gosh. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. And what would become of him?
Yeah, and because of the awesome access that you were able to get through your work, we were invited to the after party, which was right across the way from the Kodak Theater. And instead of like settling down and like eating and drinking like a VIP, you and I did exactly what I hoped we'd do, which is we ran around the 3-story party and just tried to shake hands with as many celebrities as we could possibly find.
So I've told people before that I don't really necessarily get starstruck when it comes to celebrities, meaning like movie stars. I get more starstruck when I see athletes, right? And so I remember walking around that party, and I'll get to another story here in a minute, but walking around that party, and Jason, who did you get really excited for when we saw them? Do you remember, like, they were behind some ropes? Do you remember who we saw?
I don't know if this is who you're thinking of, but it was just a few months after the Steelers had won the Super Bowl, and we saw Hines Ward, and we got a chance to, I think you grabbed him by the shoulder. Well, you didn't grab him because he would have knocked him out.
I'm sure he appreciated that.
You tapped him gingerly on the shoulder. He turned around, and you backed off like an awesome wingman, and you let me go in to shake his hand, and you got a picture of it even, which is unreal. So that was a pretty cool moment.
We continue to walk around this party, and I remember you, Jason, saying like, "Come over here, look who it is." And I don't know if we got split up at the time or if you'd gone over there and talked to his agent or something like that. But you said like, "Oh my gosh, come over here, look who it is." And who was it? Who were you talking about?
It was the one and only Chris Berman himself, all alone in the corner, all alone. And I didn't talk to the agent ahead of time. And you and I walked up. I think you were distracted by something, but I saw him and pointed him out to you. It was like the rest of the rooms in this party were filled with people, and they were really dimly lit and pretty like cool. This corner of the building had like fluorescent lights on. There was nobody around, and it was just kind of sad. It was just kind of a sad, like quiet pocket, and there against the window.
Was he eating like jalapeno poppers and?
He wasn't eating, but I think I'm certain he had a beer in his hand.
Oh, I'm certain
he was. Yeah. It's like he had been sweating since noon,
and not changed.
And he was wearing a suit and tie and jacket, and he had sweat through his shirt. And his big old forehead was covered in sweat. His shirt was covered in sweat, and Brian went in for the kill.
So there's a picture, and I remember Jason. I just was like, I'm going in there and I'm getting a picture with him. And I remember talking to him, and Jason snapped 2 pictures. One, Chris Berman is sitting there looking at me, and I don't remember anything that I said to him, but he's sitting there just looking at me. And the look on his face is what someone looks like when they're absolutely drunk, hanging on to a railing, trying to stay up. And
that's right.
And they're trying to focus. And so he's sitting there like looking at me between the eyes and trying to focus. And we turn around to take a picture. Mind you, I don't care who you are, whether it's a celebrity or anything like that. Even if you're like pissed off at the time or don't really want to take a picture, you're gonna still kind of make yourself look presentable. Jason, what did he look like in this picture?
We should tweet the picture from our handle
Oh
on
yeah,
Twitter.
absolutely. I don't think I have it. I think you have it. I don't.
Yeah,
believe
I have it. Yeah, I'll tweet it out after we're done recording. But he just looked like, like somebody who had been at the club all night. And here we are at 7 a.m. and he was just trying to keep the after party going, and nobody else wanted to. So one thing I remember you said to him was, "Man, I can't wait for it to be football season again." And he said something effective, "Yeah, me neither, man."
Hey, all I gotta say is this. At least he took a picture with you guys and was a nice guy.
No, he did. He took a picture with us. But at the same time, when you see this picture, Mike, like, he probably shouldn't have taken a picture with us. Like, I literally think it was his agent or somebody was standing next to him. Like, they should have said at the time, like, no pictures. Because the picture, like, you can see this just, like, his shirt, Mike, halfway up is covered, like, drenched in sweat. His hair is out of place and disheveled. He's sweating all over his face. And he's looking at us with, like, part of his lip is, like, drooped down. I think one eye is, like, halfway closed. Like, it's just not... He was rumbling, bumbling, stumbling, like, for sure.
Sounds like a real man to me, actually.
A real man. So, okay, so that's our story of meeting Chris Berman. And so I found it very interesting, especially with him hanging it up after 38 years at ESPN. So let's get to a little bit of course, the Super Bowl. And Mike, you, like I said earlier, you texted me and said that things had picked up in New England. So what has it been like this past week in New England?
It's picked up in the sense where my coworkers are having gambling pools. Let's do the squares.
I thought you were going to say gambling problems.
Yeah, the gambling problems. But also, I've heard buzz of, like, people are upset that Dunkin' Donuts isn't going to give free coffee if the Patriots don't win the Super Bowl, which I say that's ridiculous because, oh my God, I'm going to have to spend a few bucks on coffee if they lose or win the Super Bowl.
Is it because the Patriots have won so many Super Bowls that just Dunkin' Donuts can't afford it anymore?
They can't really afford it. You can buy 55 donuts for $3, but a cup of coffee, that's ridiculously expensive. But, there's just at work, and even though I said last podcast, and it's true, I don't live in this city, you just see a lot of stuff going around the office and people buzzing about it, gambling pools. I'm going to a party tomorrow. I'm really excited, but I'm not excited for the fact that I have work the next day. I've heard a few companies giving their employees the day off, which I am a big advocate of. Unfortunately, I don't have the day off. I might stroll into work a little bit later, which a lot of people are talking about in the office. And I think that, that should be a national holiday, personally, is Super Bowl Monday.
Sorry.
I think Jason doesn't agree with that. But before we get too much into the Super Bowl, I just want to say this. We got, as I mentioned earlier, we got 2 emails this week, and one was from this guy named Brad Davison. And he says that apparently the Patriots right now are 3-point favorites to win the game. And so he says, with them only being 3-point favorites, Mike, are you scared at all?
I'm scared at every Super Bowl. That's why I get annoyed with the arrogant comment, because I never once going into a game, even if we were playing the Browns, would feel like we got this in the bag. As much confidence and as much faith I have in the team and in our coaching staff, anything could happen on any given Saturday, Sunday, Thursday football game. And the Super Bowl, I would say, is the biggest X factor because it's such a different game. It's longer. There's a lot of different things at stake, and there's a lot more pressure.
I was watching a press conference a few days ago about the game, and they were interviewing Lady Gaga, and they asked Lady Gaga how she likes to eat her meat. And do you know what she said? She said, rah, 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 ah, oh, rah, 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 rah.
I can promise you one thing. When the game's
Did that really happen?
No.
Please don't. Okay.
I stole that joke.
So you stole it. Yeah.
When you guys started talking about football again, I started thinking about...
Had the halftime show.
When the halftime show or any commercial comes on, that's when I'm going to get my food or drink, because I don't really care about that other crap.
So
I'm turning over to the Puppy Bowl.
So
the Puppy Bowl's adorable.
Okay, so that's going to wrap up this sports section here this week as we get ready for the Super Bowl, and I'm sure there will be much that we can talk about next week, whether it's a good week for Mike to talk about it, or whether it's we stay away from it and Mike is still crying
honestly,
rivers of tears.
If they lose, I'm going to be upset, but what about the 30 other teams that didn't even get to the Super Bowl.
So, would you rather have, and Jason, chime in here, would you rather have your team make it in the playoffs and go all the way and lose in the Super Bowl, or not even make it to the playoffs? And what I mean by that is because when the Broncos went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago and lost to the Falcons, I think, or sorry, not Falcons, Seahawks 43-8, it was like, I wish we wouldn't even have made it in the playoffs because that was embarrassing.
Well, that's a hard question to answer. I think if they're competitive in the Super Bowl and ultimately lose, I would rather them get to the Super Bowl and lose. If they're going to get blown out like your boys did,
Yeah.
then forget it. Like then it's embarrassing. It's like because it's fun to have those moments when you cheer and you're excited and you feel like you've got a chance in the Super Bowl. But when they're just not even showing up, that's more frustrating than I think when it comes down to the very last second and they lose.
I don't think you're wrong, but I would rather my team get to the Super Bowl and get blown out or lose into a heartbreaker than never make it.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event.
All right, guys, well, that's going to wrap up sports this week, and let's go ahead and get to our feature segment. And this was actually an idea when we were brainstorming things to do for our podcast. This was actually one of the ideas that came across our way, and so we want to call it this week, When the Wives Are Away. And I think it would be fun to discuss our relationships, because as we told the viewers last week, that we're all in different stages of married life. One has been married 10 years, the other one's married 5, and Mike, you recently just got married. So I want to talk a little bit about what guys do when the wives are away. Now, before we get there, though, I want to take this all the way back to when we first got married. And I think it's interesting. Jason, I can't remember so much of yours and the planning of your wedding and everything, just because that was a while ago. But Mike, I remember you were involved heavily in what music would play at your wedding, right? And I was involved heavily in, there were some slideshows that played during my wedding. Were you guys involved in anything related to the minutia and the small things that went on at the weddings and the planning of the weddings?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I don't know that I necessarily had super strong opinions, or that I don't think I ever had final say, which was fine. But I was definitely like a part of the decision process.
Never had final say.
No, I mean, just yes, I don't know. And we made a couple of weird choices that
like your photographer.
Like our photographer, and the fact that we didn't, like, we agreed to have a different photographer show up on wedding day than we had worked with all along, or that we worked with a DJ service who we met with, like, the owner, and then he decided who would show up on the day of our wedding reception, and we had never met them or discussed like what their personality or style was. So there was,
that you didn't have an open bar. Was that another mistake that you guys made?
Thanks, Brian.
Well,
Exactly.
actually, it probably wasn't a huge mistake given how piss-ass drunk my ex-girlfriend was at your wedding.
And we're going to get to that here.
What do you mean we're going to get to that? What else is there to get to? I think that's an open and shut discussion right there.
All right, Jason, keep going. We'll see if we come back to that part or at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would just say that, like, in general, I would say I was pretty involved, and I was interested in some of the bigger stuff, like venue location and, like, what rehearsal dinner and, like, what we would do, like the big moments of the reception. But when it came down to smaller stuff like flowers and design and colors, like I don't remember being a part of that conversation at all.
Now, were you guys asked about that stuff, like colors or flowers, or because I just feel sometimes that the girls would ask our opinions on those things, and it's like I really don't have like really strong opinions about what flowers we should have at weddings, but yet it was almost like she needed to get my approval for it. You know what I mean? It's like they ask, but at the same time, it's like I don't necessarily know that you guys need to ask that question.
I'll tell you what, I don't remember. I don't think I was asked, but I could not believe how expensive flowers were. And in my mind, like, the chapel was going to be filled with whatever we chose. It was going to be top to bottom, and we're all going to be wearing tuxes made out of flowers, and our reception was going to be covered in flowers.
That would have been awesome.
And when we realized what our, I don't know, maybe it was $1,000 budget. I have no idea. Like, it was pretty modest. It was
roses.
a lot less flowers than I expected.
Well, it seems like once these flower places or any place finds out that you're having a wedding, it's like, oh, well, here's the price. And it's like, oh, it's for a wedding. It's like, oh, it's for a wedding? Oh, well, then
Yeah,
here's the price for it. So,
yeah.
Mike, were you involved in any of the smaller things planning the wedding? And like I said before, I knew you were heavily involved in the music, but when it came to the other stuff, did you kind of engross yourself in any of that?
See, the thing about Lauren and I, we are pretty much lockstep with a lot of the tastes we have. So it really wasn't like she would decide or I would decide, except for the music. She went with the photography, I went the music. Outside of that, it was pretty much we were involved kind of together. Not to sound corny, but we went to the venue together. We both loved the venue together. It wasn't like she liked it more, I liked it more. We kind of just knew. And then when it came to the food, it was pretty much what do we like? What do our families like? So I would say it was pretty mutual. And I was very much involved, and she was very much involved. So I don't know if that's different or the same.
Do you guys think that, or why do you think that guys really don't get involved in the planning or really care about getting involved in some of the decision making?
Because if I had been entrusted to make some of the aesthetic choices, it would not have looked like a wedding. It would have probably looked like a college house party.
Yeah, but Jason, you were also 20, what, 25 at the time?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I'm,
I got married at 34, so it's I think it's when you get married too. If I would have gotten married at 24 or 25, I probably would have been the same situation. But getting married at 34, I was actually a little more interested in it. I wasn't watching Say Yes to the Dress every Sunday and, ooh, that looks awesome, but I was also going to the venues and getting actually really interested in it and excited because it was a cool thing.
So
what about
speaking
you,
of,
Brian?
go
Brian,
ahead.
you had a pretty spectacular wedding and reception. I mean, what was your involvement?
So we had gone out, I think, not even a year beforehand, but a couple months beforehand to look at the venue and check out the venue and things of that nature. I can't necessarily remember if Jacqueline asked me a whole lot about like what do you think of these flowers, or I think she did say like, "Hey, these are the colors that I like." Right? She wanted it to kind of be a black and white wedding, which it's not like you're sitting there like picking all these different, well, I don't like blue and I don't like this red and everything is black and white. It's like, yeah, that's totally fine. And it made it easy on me because I didn't have to think about like, okay, getting blue tuxes or getting gray tuxes or, different things like that. So that kind of made it easy on me. And then she just, I don't know, she kind of just, I mean, my wife is very planny, right? But she enjoys that aspect of it. It's not like she does
You
it
guys
because
You guys had like a full-on itinerary notebook for
and
everybody at
that's
your
and
wedding.
that's what I mean, right? My wife kind of likes doing that kind of stuff more or less because she doesn't want people sitting there asking her 20 questions right before her wedding of like where to go and where to be and all that kind of stuff. So she kind of just wants to put that off of how everybody knows what they're doing and what their role is. So she kind of enjoys doing that kind of stuff. So at the same time, I kind of just took a step back and let her do that. She kind of said like, "Hey, I want you to do this and want you to do that," and I did those kind of things. And came to food, of course, you like try different things, and then it comes down to price and convenience and things like that. But Mike, what you were talking earlier about just getting excited for the venue, what was both of yours favorite part of your weddings?
For me, and I thought it was going to be my least favorite part of the event, was the first dance
Why so?
because I thought I was going to fail miserably at it. Lauren and I don't like a lot of eyes on us and of attention in that way, but it turned out to be our favorite part of the event because it worked out. It was to a song that we both love that I'm going to sound like, ridiculous for saying this, but I wanted this to be my first dance song since I heard it. And it just was, it was just me and her, and it worked out, and it was awesome. And we got pretty drunk after that, so that's the last the last things I remember.
That's the last
What
thing
was
you
the
remember.
what was the song, Mike? What was the song?
It was "Let My Love Open the Door" by Pete Townsend, but it was the slow version from Grosse Point Blank.
And
Pretty great song.
Jason, what was your favorite part of your wedding besides
Uh,
Mike coming in and asking for a plunger?
That was not for me, by the way.
Mike, what was it
uh,
for?
I'm gonna keep this civil and not say. It was
uh,
not for me though.
I think my favorite part was the fact that my dad's a pastor and that my dad was the one to marry both of us, and that you guys were there and family was there, and we got married in the chapel where we all went to school at Cal Lutheran. So I'd say that the actual ceremony was my favorite part, even though it was 150 degrees in there.
Oh man, it was so hot in there. Yeah.
I will say though, my wedding though, my favorite thing though, and that we knew this was coming in because you guys flew out to Massachusetts the week leading up to it when we got to tour the city together and got to go to the haunted house. That was fun.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the vow part. My wife isn't one that would sit there and tell you, like all this mushy stuff to you. And I usually, if she does, it's in a card or something, and I tell her, I'm like, you should probably say this stuff out loud and just not always written down. So when she sat there at the ceremony and said those things to me, I thought that part was pretty cool. And then just the party afterwards and dancing. I mean, I think probably a lot of people like that aspect of the wedding, but just her sitting there and saying those things, it was pretty cool to see her kind of vulnerable, because she doesn't like it either. She's like you, Mike. She doesn't like a lot of eyes on her, and a lot of people to hear kind of these intimate thoughts or things that she's saying. So that was kind of nice to see. And as we've now been married or and going through life, of course there are times where we're now with these people 24/7, or a lot of the time besides being at work. So we have actually talked about this before, of like, when the wives go away, certain things that we do. So there are times, obviously, during the marriage where you're together, and I don't want the listener to think that this is like a bashing session, that we're like, oh gosh, so thank God they're leaving for the weekend, you know what I mean? I think maybe women feel that when they leave to go out of town and we get excited about it, it's because we don't want to be around them anymore, and it's like, that's actually the last thing I think of, is like, oh gosh, thank God you're leaving. It's like, actually has nothing to do with that. So what are some of the things that you guys do or get excited about or do differently, obviously, when the girls are away compared to when they're there? And same with kids. Jason and I obviously have kids right now. When the kids are gone with mom as well.
Complete debauchery. I'm just kidding. Well, for me, I mean, it's literally like I'm 23 again, and I mean that in a very innocent way, where I order
Porn.
pizza.
Oh, okay.
Oh, the pizza. That's
Yeah,
what I mean.
pizza.
First of
Yeah,
all,
yeah.
you don't have to order porn. You can just go online and get it very easily. Wow.
System.
No, I
From
order,
www.creedthoughts.
I order pizza specifically from a place called Papa Gino's. I'm not doing an ad. And not only do I get pizza, but I get boneless buffalo wings or boneless barbecue wings.
Oh,
Mozzarella
you're bad.
I know, right? And I get mozzarella sticks, which I also reheat when I get home, so they're extra gooey and cheesy and runny.
Please
I'll-
don't say gooey anymore.
And moist.
I throw on NFL Network or ESPN. I'll watch that for a good hour. After I'm full and fat, I'll make myself a nice mixed drink, and then I'll
just
watch whatever
fried
I want.
food and cheese.
I'm gonna live to be 43.
Yeah, exactly.
Then I'll throw on NFL Network or No, sorry, I already said I would put that on. Then I'll throw on Netflix, and I will watch a movie on Netflix, or I'll watch 4 episodes of a crime drama, and then I'll fall asleep, fat and kind of gross feeling, and then I'll wake up the next morning kind of regretful that I had such an unhealthy night.
So, so it's like,
And
so when
that
the
morning,
girls,
I'll make myself a nice pot of coffee. I'll walk around the house admiring the things that I have,
in your
and I'll
underwear.
listen to a few other podcasts, and I'll listen to some soundtracks like from Dead Poets Society or Back to the Future. And then when Lauren gets home, I'll say, I missed you.
Say, I missed you.
Was that super specific to warrant all this?
I'm crying.
Them walking around admiring what he has is my favorite part.
Is that while you're listening to soundtracks, or do you then sit down and listen to soundtracks later?
It's both. I'll sit down and I'll listen to soundtracks and I'll think, wow, this is a good song as I'm sipping my coffee. Then I'll walk around the house and I'll be like, oh, that's a nice baseboard. Or, wow, look at the vaulted ceiling. Oh, that's a really
While the
nice light
music's still
fixture I
playing,
put in.
correct? The music's still
Oh, of
blaring.
course. I
Yeah.
love Good Will Hunting soundtrack or Dead Poet Society.
So, Jason, what do you do when the wife is away and the kids are gone?
Well, Sarah doesn't eat red meat, and so when she's gone, I typically use that as a chance to make some kind of
Meat.
dinner or food. Yeah, some kind of food that I don't usually get to eat when she's around. And so inevitably, I'll get off of work at 5:30 or 6 or whatever, and I'll go to the store and I'll like spend forever at the grocery store finding just the right ingredients. Then I'll think, oh, since this is my one chance to have bacon, maybe I'll go to Whole Foods and buy bacon. And so I'll go get all my ingredients except for the bacon. Then I'll go to Whole Foods, buy the bacon, and then I'll think, well, I should really get gas. And I like doing errands by myself, and I'm going to be productive, and I can do this whole living alone, independent thing. I'm good at this. So I get gas, and maybe I pick up my dry cleaning, and then I get home and I start like making all the ingredients. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to take the extra time to fry the tortillas instead of just using tortilla chips, and then cook that and cook this and mix that. Oh, it's 11 o'clock. Awesome. I'm really tired, and I've completely wasted my whole night in the kitchen. And I have done that every time she's gone out of town since we've gotten married, without fail. And as proof, like one time I was home alone, and it was a Sunday afternoon. I could have gone anywhere. I could have done anything. I had the entire day to myself, and Mike calls me. I'm alone Sunday afternoon, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm making cookies from scratch." Like, why? Why do I do this? I don't even like to cook that much. But inevitably, I end up like cooking all this food, and she gets home, and I'm like, "Oh, I've made dinner for the week," and she's like, "I don't like cheese pasta. Like, what? You just wasted all of our groceries."
I don't like pizza bites for the whole week.
Yeah.
So-
Jason makes some delicious queso.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
So
Yeah.
why do we get so excited when the girls leave? It's not like we're sitting there like, "Oh, thank God you're leaving," like I said before, but it's like,
Well,
when you hear about them going out of town or leaving, it's like you
So-
get excited, but it's not you're excited that they're leaving.
I alluded to this last week where I sneak Sour Patch Kids, and I'll admit it, I have an awful diet. I am not very good with eating, but when Lauren's away, I have a little less shame. I feel bad for myself after I've eaten it, but at least I don't have to feel bad while I'm eating it. I love my wife dearly, and she is, makes me a better person, and I make myself a worse person. But at least when I'm alone, for the moment while I'm eating crappy food, I don't have to feel too bad.
Next week on the show, we bring on a therapist for Mike.
No, but I mean, honestly, when she's away too, and everyone needs their alone time. Lauren needs it from me.
Yeah.
Of course, and I can watch ESPN for 3 hours. When Lauren's around, I feel bad if I do that for 3 hours. But I know when I'm away from the house, I know she watches crap I would never watch for 3 hours. I'll come home and I'll turn on the TV and it's on TLC because she's been watching my 500-pound life with, whatever, because she loves that stuff. So, Brian, when your wife's away, what do you do?
Okay, so you have to first off, you have to understand my house. Okay, so if you were to walk in, I've told this before to people. If you were to walk into my house right now, you would not know that a man lives here. Okay, I think I have about 20 inches of space in our closet and a drawer in our dresser to house like all my clothes, and everything that I've collected over the years, or man stuff or anything like that. My wife has made me put everything in the garage. So my man cave is literally like a 30 by 20-inch Rubbermaid container out in the garage. So when she goes out of town, I think, okay, so I can go get the stuff that's in the Rubbermaid and play with that. So okay, so when she's
Logs, Duplos.
yeah, exactly, my Legos. So I head out there and I get this Rubbermaid is full of just certain magazines that I don't read when she's home. Okay, and so I bring it inside to look at for the weekend, and it's my lot of WWF magazines from when I was a kid. Okay.
Oh,
And
that's
that's truthful, right? It's not porn. It's not anything like that. I think what's funny is it has nothing to even do with that kind of stuff. But I think to myself, like I'm a huge wrestling fan. I've been a huge wrestling fan for a long time, and so I don't actually watch it that much anymore. Just because like my wife will sit there like every 2 minutes if I turn it on, or even the first 2 minutes, like we'll make fun of it, and I'm just like, okay, we're gonna go ahead and end this right now. So I really don't watch it that much or anything. So when she goes out of town, I think to myself like, oh man, I'm gonna go ahead and binge watch just wrestling and things like that. So I'll bring in these WWF magazines that I had from when I was a kid, which takes me back to my childhood, and I'll sit there for hours reading about how Hulk Hogan felt betrayed by Macho Man, when he was attacked at WrestleMania, and how the Hulkster is plotting his revenge. And I really don't think of like the food aspect of it, like I guess because like I'll go get like a pizza and wings, right, and do that, or maybe some bagel bites or pizza pockets or something. It's usually always something involved with pizza, but I normally don't sit there and go and buy all this food and stay in the kitchen, all night like Jason does till midnight. But so I'll watch wrestling, but I find what happens is literally like say toward the end of the night, I'll turn on with the Amazon Fire, it has YouTube, so I'll turn on YouTube, right? And I'll get lost on YouTube for just like hours. And what I mean by that is like you'll look up like the funniest dog moments of 2016 and then like hours later I end up watching NBC's complete coverage of the 1984 presidential election, right? It's just like how do you go from searching for this to then you just go here, and how then I'll look at all of a sudden it's like plane crashes, and I start looking at plane crashes.
What the hell are you doing?
And like Mayday stories and everything like that, right? So I'm like so freaked out. But then what always happens is I end up watching like some scary movie, and then it's like midnight, and I'm home alone, and it's like dark in the house, and I freak myself out before I go to bed, and I'm like, why did I end up watching that horror film right before I'm going to bed when I'm like the only person here? So every like crick and crack in the house, and I think like, oh my gosh, somebody's here, and I'm by myself, and
I can't wait to have a kid to scare the living shit out of them.
it's fun. I mean, I've scared Addison before, obviously not with
No,
horror
no.
films,
I mean,
but...
Lauren's like, don't do it because they're gonna be in our room all the time.
when they're in the bassinet, they're too little to be scared.
Correct, yeah.
Well, I'm not gonna do it when they're infants, but when they're like, I don't know, 6 or 7,
Yeah.
I want to hide under the bed, and when they're getting ready, I want to like grab their ankle, something like that.
That's good. That's good.
That's
Traumatize the child. So okay, so going off of that part, we've talked about what we do when the wives are away, and just it being like an exciting time for us. But Mike, you'd said something earlier. When they come home, you say like, "Oh, I loved you and I missed you." So after we've had that weekend, or we've had that week and a half or week that they've been gone, what is it that you miss most about them and are excited about when they come home?
I miss just hanging out with Lauren and talking with her and our interaction with our dog. So, as weird as that sounds, we just have our little kind of life together, and I miss that. You can only be alone so long before you're like, okay, I kind of miss human interaction. And that's what I do miss. And I know when she's alone, she, has a great time, but also misses that as well. Because when I come home, I can see, she's excited because there's someone to talk to, and it's that whole interaction part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely miss my wife when she's gone for a couple of days, and by the last night that she's gone, I'm super ready for her to come home. And then inevitably, the other reason that I definitely know that I miss her when she's gone is a little bit more functional, and that is to say, like, for example, she'll open the dirty clothes hamper and see that maybe I would have worn a beige dress shirt and beige pants and beige shoes to work the day before, and she's like, did you really wear this to work?
Like you're a Colombian drug lord or something.
And so it's in those moments when I realize, man, I really rely on her a lot for making just better choices in my life, whether it's fashion or nutrition or otherwise. So she definitely helps. She definitely helps me make more adult choices.
Yeah, I can see that. I think like you start to when you're around somebody every single day, whether it be, I mean, this happens at work or whether it just be, with friends or family and with wives, like you just start to take them for granted, when you're around them every day, and the minutia of every day starts to cloud all of what that person means to you, and what all they offer, what they offer and do for you. I mean, my wife has made the comment that, like when she'll go out of town, it's kind of, by day 2 or 3, I'm sitting there like sending text messages of like, I love you so much, like I miss you and blah blah blah. And she just says it's so funny because as she's leaving, it's not like I'm excited like running out there like waving goodbye to her and like, fireworks going off, but then I'll, just always comes down because you realize, oh wow, I don't like the independent 23-year-old Brian, like he didn't make good choices. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to necessarily go back to that lifestyle, Brian.
I mean, I distinctly remember early 20s just sitting around kind of alone. This is sounding so depressing, but it's not meant to be. I'm like, I can't wait to just be with someone and like talk to them and have fun with them and watch a show with them and have dinner with them. And I think that's what it's all about. You enjoy when you're alone because you can, have your fun eating crappy food or spending 5 hours making something like Jason or watching something on TV. But then it gets old after a period of time and you just want your normalcy back and you want your conversations and you want your life.
Although I would love to try some of those cookies that Jason bakes, just because I've never seen like really Jason bake, so I would love to sit there. If it's taking you 5 hours to bake cookies, those have to be some really good cookies.
It's not good. It's not good. I'll tell you that. It's not good.
So we'll go ahead and end this segment for the week. And ladies, we are sensitive. We don't sit there and just are so happy that you're gone and just to do guy things and everything. So, but that was just a little insight as to what happens in the life of guys when the girls are away. And Mike, you had mentioned this earlier, just talking about walking around your house listening to music and admiring things. So I thought for this week's top 3, we would do our top 3 movie soundtracks. So Jason, do you want to go first? Mike, you want to go first? Either one of you guys take it first and give us your top 3.
We might have some crossover here because
I doubt it.
Well,
Yeah,
Brian and
I
I
don't-
might have some crossover.
I don't think so. Maybe if it was top 10 or top 5, maybe, but I don't think top 3 there will be.
I'll start by saying this. There's many movies I love out there where I like 1 or 2 songs or the score, like Young Guns or Red Dawn, because I'm such a huge fan of those movies. But if I'm going from a full soundtrack, the entire soundtrack of a movie, I have my top 3. So I'll start with number 3. And I know this might actually, you guys might think this might be my number 1, but it's my number 3. It's the Back to the Future soundtrack. And
Yeah.
I love that soundtrack because it has great music from actual recording artists like Huey Lewis and the News with Back in Time and The Power of Love. But the actual score of the movie, the theatrical score from the orchestra is so powerful and so great. And I think anyone would recognize it, and it's really well done, and it gets you excited for the movie. Number 2, more so for the music of the movie, like bands, I love Forrest Gump because it had a lot of those oldies bands. And I mean, growing up as a kid with my parents who were born in 47, I listened to a lot of those, 1960s or 1950s, Motown and doo-wop bands. So they had Forrest Gump had a lot of those songs in it, and I just thought that was a great soundtrack. And then Sandlot too, but Forrest Gump I think was a little better. And number 1 for me was Top Gun. Top Gun, the soundtrack was amazing. It had great songs from Danger Zone to Playing with the Boys to Berlin's Take My... Yes, great song.
The most homoerotic part of that whole movie.
It was a great song. And Berlin's Take My Breath Away, but then also the theatrical score with the guitar. Like, I don't want to actually make the sound of the guitar because it'll sound ridiculous, but that beginning scene with the waves crashing and like the jets taking off was just so cool. So those are my top 3.
Mike, were those songs like done for the movie, or were those already popular songs that the movie used?
So for Back to the Future, Back in Time was part of the movie. I don't know if Power of Love was for the movie, but Back in Time definitely.
I think it was. I think Huey Lewis made a lot of songs directly just for the movie.
Forrest Gump definitely not, because all those songs
No.
predated.
But what about Top Gun?
Well, the soundtrack score, the guitar riff song was. I don't think the other songs were. Playing with the Boys might have been because they were, as Brian said, it was an interesting scene of them playing volleyball on the beach. But
I think
Dangerous...
Berlin was, because they made like the music video for that song it's like a fighter jet, and so I think that Berlin
maybe
song
Top
was
Gun,
made
Top
for
Gun
it.
may have been. So it may have been. So maybe, yeah, I think that may have been catered for the movie. Kind of like a lot of Kenny Loggins music too.
Yeah, and that score to that a lot. I mean, people think of the music in that movie, and it's not just the Danger Zone and songs with lyrics. That score is great in that movie. So, Jason, what about you?
All right, top three. Number 3 would be Harry Potter, the first Harry Potter soundtrack, which is not popular music like Mike, but I'm not I'm not necessarily as cool as Mike.
Do you put that on when Sarah's out of town and run around with a wand?
Yeah, and I run around with a wand and I say expecto patronum to all of my nice things.
I think I'm the only one who doesn't know what that means, but.
The reason that I like that is because when I was working at this office job in college, my office mate would always put that song on, and so like I just got used to working like with that song on in the background, and you listen to something enough times and you're like, oh, this is pretty decent, and so it always just reminds me of a little bit of college and a little bit of like this particular job that I really enjoyed while we were in school, and it's John Williams, so it's pretty good music.
Mm-hmm.
My number 2 is Armageddon. The Armageddon soundtrack, which is...
I think most guys born from like 1981 to 87 own that soundtrack.
Yeah.
Kind of like the Godzilla soundtrack.
Yeah, I was just gonna mention
own
that too. The
too.
Godzilla soundtrack too. Yep.
Yeah, I thought about saying that one, but I only really listened to the first like couple of songs, the Puff Daddy song, and then there was I can't remember now, but yes, that's a great soundtrack.
Well, maybe Green Day's Brain Stew was on the Godzilla.
Yeah.
But you're talking about Armageddon, sorry.
Armageddon. No, just with like, all the classic rock and like ZZ Top and of course Aerosmith, and it was a good album. And then my number 1, this is ridiculous, but if I'm being honest, like as I think back to like when I was a kid, like what soundtrack did I listen to more than any other soundtrack? And so for me, for my childhood, right, wrong, or indifferent, my
Rent.
favorite. No, you asshole. It's not Rent. No. It's the soundtrack to the Jim Carrey movie The Mask.
Oh my gosh! Oh my gosh!
But if that was a ton of like big band in that movie.
Oh, I hate big band.
Well, I would encourage you to go back to iTunes and like sample the soundtrack, because I think you'd be surprised. It's pretty good.
What band is it? Just big bands, or is there like popular bands that are on it?
Oh, Brian, there's no popular bands on it at all.
Oh, okay, so it's just big band stuff.
Is it like Brian Sensor Orchestra and Squirrel
Yeah.
Trooper and all those?
Yeah, Brian Seltzer,
Yeah, so there you go. It's my top 3.
Alrighty, so for my top 3, okay, my third one, I would say, is the Varsity Blues soundtrack.
Oh yes,
which
Run
had
by Collective Soul.
Correct, yeah, Run by Collective Soul, which is, I think we all really like Collective Soul. And then Nice Guys Finished Last by Green Day. There was Hot for Teacher by Van Halen was on there.
Yeah,
My Hero by Foo Fighters. And there's actually a lot of other really good songs on that soundtrack, and so that just takes me back to high school and seeing that movie and that soundtrack, and I really like that soundtrack. And that I smiled, Mike, when you said Forrest Gump for your number 2, because that's my number 2 as well. 2-disc, 34-track soundtrack.
Yes.
And you're talking about Elvis. There was the Beach Boys, Mamas and the Papas, the Doors, Leonard Skinner, Fleetwood Mac, and that's just naming a few. I mean, there's Fortunate Son. I can't even remember that guy's name.
There's so many great oldie songs in that movie.
And that movie did such a good job of showing, as he was growing up and getting older, of incorporating the music from that generation of where he was at in life into the movie. And it's just, one of my favorite parts of that movie, meaning for music-wise, not the actual movie, but is when Robin Wright is actually standing on the ledge at that place thinking about if she's going to jump off or not, and the guitar solo from Leonard Skinner comes on. from Freebird, and it's just like, oh man, just the way that what that music did for that movie was just, was just amazing. So it's funny to me that that's both our number twos, and it's such an amazing soundtrack, but it didn't make it number one. That it got bumped both from our number one. And so my number one movie soundtrack of all time would have to be the Rocky IV soundtrack.
Oh yes, Hearts on Fire.
Yes. And so that's what I was talking about. So there's Hearts on Fire. Better than that, there's Burning Heart. Eye of the Tiger is actually on that soundtrack by Survivor, even because it's played at the very beginning of the movie. But yet I listen to that song like the least on it, just because there's so many other good songs. Because of the score, when he's training in the mountains, and then when he's
in Russia. Yes.
Well, yeah, in Russia, but which is actually filmed in Wyoming. But when he's training, that score, and then when he's fighting Drago at the very end, just the music that's playing. I love that soundtrack, and I watched that movie 100 times as a kid, and so I just absolutely love that soundtrack. So that is my
Burning Heart, Hearts on Fire.
Yes.
Those are two amazing songs.
Back to back, which Burning Heart was by Survivor as well. So that was I think Eye of the Tiger was for number 3, and so they made Burning Heart for number 4. So that soundtrack is they did a really, really good job on that. So
Wait, Eye of the Tiger is not from the first Rocky?
It is.
Oh,
no,
it is.
Eye of the Tiger is from Rocky 3. That's when it was.
Oh, it is? Oh.
Yeah. So.
Oh.
No, the first 2 Rockies just had scores. The dun 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 dun. Like that's the main music from the first 2 movies, and then Rocky 3 is when they started to get into like the rock stuff. Rocky 4 had James Brown when he was introducing
for Apollo Creed.
Yeah, and so James Brown is doing, I think, All Across America or
Living in
America.
Yeah,
I've never seen the Rocky movies. Do I have to watch them in order, or can I jump to the best one?
Oh, Jason, come
on, dude.
What?
Jump to the best one?
Yeah.
Well, okay, never mind. You have to watch them all. Rocky 5's kind of a crap.
Yeah, Rocky 5's kind of a crap. Okay, so I'll just say this. Rocky 1 and 2, some people may not like, just because sometimes they can be a little slower and there's more story there. Once you get into Rocky 3 and 4, that's like when just action picks up. Like Rocky 4 is just full of just
Rocky 4 is my favorite.
Yeah, Rocky 4 is my favorite too. So it kind of ruined it for me, because I remember watching Rocky 4 and being like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to watch a boxing match, because these guys will just sit there and absolutely destroy each other. And then you watch a real boxing match and you're like, this is bullshit. Like they don't do any of that crap. So that'll close out our top 3 for the week. We hope you guys enjoyed our favorite soundtracks. And to do our go home segment here, Mike, do you have a life tip of the week for the people out there?
Yeah, I do. I would be pegged as a worrywart. I worry a lot, and I think a lot of people out there do. So my life tip of the week is something I've tried to convince myself and do myself in practice, and would hope other people would do, is if you're ever in a situation where you think it's a bad situation, where you're worrying about something and it's really getting to you, think about a year from now, 2 years from now, is this going to be a big deal? And I think that's important to take in mind of what's actually important in life and what's just something that's just trivial that shouldn't make you worry about it. Because I think about stuff I was just pining over 2 years ago, and I'm like, why would I ever worry about that? So I think that's good advice, and I try to take it to heart. It's hard sometimes, but just think ahead. Like, will I be worried about this in 2 years? No, I won't. So try not to worry about it and just action on it, or don't, and move on.
Thank you for that tip of the week. We appreciate it, Mike. And any go-home thoughts, guys, on our second episode here on iTunes and the podcast world?
If you are going to start a podcast, I hope that you finish up before your kids wake up from their naps. So I'm 2 for 2 in that regard.
Mike, anything you want to say?
Walk around and enjoy what you have and admire it.
In your boxers while your best soundtrack is playing in the background. So I just want to go ahead and close out this episode by saying, please visit us on iTunes and rate us and leave a quick review. Like, that'll help us out a lot and get us more exposure so we can share this podcast with more people. And we appreciate you guys hitting that download button and listening to our listening to our nonsense. You can also send us an email at dudewe'readults, no apostrophe in that we're, at gmail.com, and hit us up on Twitter at dudewe'readults. Again, no apostrophe in that we're. With that being said, good luck tomorrow, Mikey.
Thank you. It'll be fun.
All right, everybody. We'll see you next week.
See you next week.